Hiya, my name is Matt, and this is my channel, Beer, Wood, Bigfoot Ghosts. That's what I said, Beer, Wood, Bigfoot Ghost. Today's episode is on Bigfoot. This is my first one, and I'm going to talk about that central question that everybody asks. Do you believe in Bigfoot? If you watched my ghost video a couple weeks ago, I answered that question right up front. Yes, I think ghosts are real. Today for Bigfoot, I'm not going to answer that question right away. Instead, I'm going to get into a little bit about what people think Bigfoot is, the arguments for and arguments against Bigfoot being real, and then I'm going to answer that question for you. But before I do any of that, I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, I listen religiously to a podcast called Mysterious Brews. Two guys in a deep, dank, dark basement in the bowels of Georgia where I live. And it's a podcast, basically true crime, but they also do a lot of paranormal and supernatural stuff. In fact, those two gentlemen got together about their love of Bigfoot. And I'm wearing their shirt right now, Mysterious Brews. Deuces! All right. I'll put a link to the podcast below. Go check it out. Number two, I tried to get Sierra Nevada's Bigfoot barley wine ale out of season, couldn't get it. I did recently taste it at their tap room up in Asheville, North Carolina. Really good, really tasty. But I did get Sierra Nevada's regular pale ale. This has been brewed since the early 1980s in California. And Sierra Nevada, of course, because Bigfoot is often found or sighted or believed to be living in the Sierra Nevada mountains in the northern California mountain range. So let's crack one open.
Do a proper pour into what's called a Bigfoot glass. Oh yeah, see if I can do that now.
Spilling, nice, nice. Proper pour, proper head retention. Look at that. And again, featured today, Mr. Bigfoot. All right, let's take a sip. Wipe that all off my face, and we'll put it back down over here. All right. So Bigfoot, again, central question, is Bigfoot real? I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's start with what people believe Bigfoot is. Okay, the common definition, right? This is a common definition, and it changes a little bit depending on who you're talking to and at what time in history you're talking about. But basically, Bigfoot is described as a large, muscular, bipedal human or ape-like creature, cryptid, covered in black, dark brown, or dark reddish hair. Anecdotal descriptions estimate the height to be roughly anywhere from 6 to 9 feet tall. The name Bigfoot is relatively a new term applied to what describes this creature. It originates, from what I can tell, the late 1950s by a logging company that was working in operations in Northern California. And the impressions left in their area were Bigfoot, right? They had a large type of foot, so they called it a Bigfoot. We also refer to Bigfoot in North America, right? And I'm talking North America at large. We're talking Canada all the way down into Mexico. We're talking about Bigfoot also being known as Sasquatch. Now, Sasquatch has its origins in Native American Salish or Salish language. And the Salish name would be Sasquitz. I'll spell that for you. Sasquits, which loosely translates into wild man. So Bigfoot, Sasquatch, when you're talking about North America at large. Okay. So what do people believe Bigfoot actually is, right? So we've kind of given a description of Bigfoot, but what do people think Bigfoot is? And there are some commonalities across the world about this Bigfoot creature, and that would be it's an undiscovered or yet discovered ape-like creature. That is an undiscovered evolutionary link, missing link between apes and humans. It's a paranormal or spiritual being. It's an extraterrestrial or alien. And some people think interdimensional being. And I think that interdimensional part comes a lot from people trying to explain away Well, you can see Bigfoot one instance and not the next, or it just seems to disappear into the woods or wherever you're looking. And that's where that comes from. Okay, so those are common things: ape-like creature, evolutionary, missing link, paranormal or spiritual being, especially when you talk about Native American folklore, and extraterrestrial or interdimensional being. Okay, so we defined what people commonly think Bigfoot is, and we talked a little bit about the description. And so we're now going to move on to the arguments for the existence of Bigfoot. All right. Let's first acknowledge that, well, at least when I was in high school, they thought the first humans were in greater North America about 13,000 years ago, and that they had migrated across the Bering Land Bridge. We now know through modern science, anthropology, archaeology, that humans probably originated in North America as early as 30,000 years ago. And we're talking about the original indigenous people of this area. We're talking about First Nations people, or what I'm going to refer to today throughout the rest of this episode as Native Americans. Okay. So, Native Americans have been in this greater continental United States and North America at large for about 30,000 years. And for hundreds, if not thousands of years, Native Americans have talked about a Bigfoot type creature either through oral tradition, folklore, and in some cases, written communication. So let's talk about that a little bit. So if we go back about 1,000 years ago, there were these cave drawings found in California, which are called the Mayak Datat, and I'll spell that for you: Maykdatat. The Mayak Datat, if I'm saying that right, these are pictographs that were found on a cave wall, and they depict a family of Bigfoots. Now, what's important to recognize here is that the modern day Tool River Reservation Native Americans believe that that pictograph depicts modern day Bigfoot. Okay, that's their belief, and it's important to acknowledge that. It's not just an interpretation by everybody outside of the reservation about what those pictographs mean, but the actual reservation people themselves, that tribe, the descendants of the original people that put the pictographs up on the cave wall, believe that's modern day Bigfoot. So it's very important we acknowledge that. I'm going to put a link below to an article written about Mayak Datat, the Hairy Man pictographs, and that was by Kathy Moskowitz Strain. And I'll put the link below, like I said, so that you can look at that a little bit further. But I think it's important that we start with the Native American people of North America acknowledging this creature going back hundreds, if not 1,000 years ago. Okay. So if you go across the entire continental United States, a number of Native American tribes have described something that includes a hairy man, a wild man, or a forest giant, which are kind of lumped together to represent this creature known as Bigfoot. So we go back hundreds, if not thousands of years of both oral tradition and folklore from Native Americans that are talking about this creature, okay? So let's just digress for a moment about Native American sightings of Bigfoot, because I think it's very important that we acknowledge that you should be able to rightly eliminate any current day motivations for Bigfoot sightings, which could be monetizing the experience, getting fame and fortune, if you will, trying to fit into a community, right? All motivations that are human in nature and that could explain why somebody claims they have some evidence of Bigfoot, okay? But go back to this Native American, first indigenous people of North America. There's no motivation like that, right? When their pictograph is up on a wall or there's oral tradition about what they see, that simply is explaining their history, their culture, their experiences. So I think it's very important to note that. All right. So let's move on to, take a sip first, eyewitness accounts or personal interactions at large. Okay. So beyond Native American oral tradition and folklore, European settlers, as far back as the Spanish explorers and the Mexican settlers in the 16th century, were describing a large Bigfoot type creature in North America. Okay, so we're going back again to the 1500s or so, that 16th century, where we're first seeing descriptions in North America about Bigfoot from European settlers. All right. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were exploring and moving from Mexico up into what's considered the continental United States today. And they were encountering this creature at their campsites at night, all these sort of things. And you can go back and you can find a number of stories written by Spanish explorers that talk about this Bigfoot type creature. In North America alone, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, or BFRO, has documented over 3,000 sightings of this Bigfoot creature in North America since the mid-1990s, okay? 3,000 sightings since the 1990s. So let's just talk a little bit about eyewitness accounts, okay? In the history of the United States criminal justice system, we used to heavily depend on eyewitness testimony in trial to provide evidence against someone that a crime was committed and that person was responsible for committing that crime. We've largely moved away from placing that much importance on eyewitness testimony today because of modern science, right? DNA evidence, hair and fiber, fingerprints, etc., has largely replaced eyewitness testimony. And the main reason for that is humans can get it wrong, right? They either can get it wrong because their mind fills in the blanks about what they thought they saw, or possibly they were influenced by a very aggressive prosecutor or other witnesses at a scene, or they have personal biases or motivations to basically provide false testimony. Okay? And our criminal justice system in the last 20 years, you can find example after example of formerly convicted people now being exonerated by current science, usually DNA evidence, that largely dispels that eyewitness testimony. Okay? So when you're considering somebody seeing something and providing an account of what they saw, you have to take that human nature to fill in the blanks in their mind, or be influenced by other people, or outright fabricate what they saw for whatever motivation, personal or otherwise. However, it would be statistically ignorant to suggest that 3,000 sightings since the mid-1990s are all false, right? Now, you can account for people making stuff up. You can account for people seeing things that they can't explain, and so they try to fill in what they think they saw. Maybe it was a brown bear, black bear, large elk, or otherwise. They catch a glimpse of something. Maybe it's another human walking around at night and they see it in the distance. Okay. So you can account for those things, all right? But you can't take thousands of sightings and immediately discount them as fabricated or false. You just can't. Statistically, it just doesn't happen. Okay? So that's what I want to say about eyewitness testimony. Okay. So you've got Native Americans, first European settlers, and modern day inhabitants of North America, all providing personal accounts of something they saw, generally out in the woods and in the mountains, that they can't explain and they think is Bigfoot. And let's move on to my favorite category here about suggestions or arguments for the existence of Bigfoot, and that would be the discovery of new species every year. Okay, I'm going to cite 2024 as an example. So in 2024, the California Academy of Sciences noted 136 new species. The Natural History Museum in the United States noted 190 new species. And in China, they identified 234 new species. And the Schmidt, S-C-H-M-I-D-T, Schmidt, I'm from Minnesota. I should be able to pronounce that easily, right? Schmidt Ocean Institute discovered more than 100 new species of marine life. Okay. So every year in this vast world we have, high mountaintops all the way down to the depths of the ocean, hundreds, if not thousands, of new species are discovered every year. And once believed to be extinct species are relocated, refound, rediscovered, and new populations exist of them as well. So if you take that into consideration, the identification of new species every year, and you apply that to the thought about what Bigfoot could be, possibly the missing link or an unidentified ape-like creature, then it kind of makes sense a little bit, doesn't it? All right? So you've got people seeing stuff that they can't exactly identify, and you've got the phenomenon of new species every year that are being discovered. Okay. So we talked about Native American folklore, and we talked about the number of sightings in modern day North America. We talked about newly discovered species, and now let's move into this area that Bigfoot, or that creature described as Bigfoot, is not an isolated thing to North America. There are Bigfoot creatures or creatures that are similar to Bigfoot worldwide. And I'll read off the list to you. And this is kind of a short list, and there's actually a little more than this, but I'll just highlight these for you. The Almas in Central Asia, the Chemisit or Chesimit in Kenya, the Hibagan in Japan, the Mapinguari in Brazil, and I could be pronouncing that wrong, or any of these names wrong, by the way, the Orange Pendek in Indonesia, the Wild Man in Borneo, the Yeti in the Himalayas, the Yeren in China, the Almasti in Russia, and the Yowie in Australia, and like I said, there's many more. So, if you look across this vast world of ours, for decades, if not hundreds of years, other areas in the world, other peoples have described a similar creature to what we call Bigfoot in North America. Now, it differs sometimes by hair color and mannerisms, but there is a consistency for this creature. And that kind of makes you pause and go, why is that? All right. And then we're going to talk a little bit about so-called evidence that's been presented to argue that Bigfoot is real. And that evidence commonly is referring to Bigfoot impressions, right? So you're talking large bipedal impressions in riverbanks, forest areas that people either cast or they take special imaging with today to be able to estimate the weight of that impression, the size of the creature that made that impression, etc. Can that stuff be faked? Absolutely. You'd be kidding yourself if you didn't think that somebody could go out there and fake that type of stuff. But then there's also been serious academics and scientists that have studied some of these impressions, and they just cannot logically explain how they were made, other than to suggest that there is a creature like Bigfoot out there that could have made those impressions. Now, there's been hair samples taken, there's been biodata that's been taken from soil samples, etc., and a lot of that stuff's been tested, and I'll let you do your own research on that. As far as I understand today, none of that evidence, Bigfoot impressions, hair, biodata, etc., has conclusively determined the existence of a Bigfoot, at least in North America. So there's been some stuff that I've seen on various popular television shows and internet sites that put more weight behind that alleged evidence. But the scientific community at large has not acknowledged that data as being evidence of the existence of this Bigfoot creature. So take it for what it is, but that's kind of where we are today in 2025. All right, we talked about the arguments for the existence of Bigfoot. Now let's talk about the glaring argument against the existence of Bigfoot, and that is, where the hell's the body, right? Where's the skeletal structure? All right. Yes, a number of people have put forward carcasses of Bigfoot or other animals that have alleged to be Bigfoot, and there's been bone found that people have put forward to being evidence of Bigfoot. And none of it has proven out to be real. So just take a step back for a second and consider that if this creature is real and it's out there, then where the hell are the bodies? Would we find a deceased Bigfoot someplace? Would we not find skeletal remains of this creature that we'd be able to carbon date or otherwise scientifically test to be able to show that it died 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and not thousands of years ago, okay? It's not out there. It doesn't exist, okay? And I know that's a little controversial when I say that, because some people think that there has been stuff that's been put forward, but largely, all that's been proven to be fake, forgery, otherwise. Okay. Now, this is where you get the arguments for why we can't find this type of stuff, right? And people will make excuses. That's what humans do. When you can't explain something, you'll try to fill in logically from your experiences. And the older you are, the more experiences you've had, or your training, or your education, or whatever it is. You try to fill in the blanks about how you explain away that you've never found a body or skeletal remains. Okay. So some people will say interdimensional being, right? Now that's in my world, it's my opinion, that's a very convenient argument for being able to say, well, you can't find it because they can disappear just like that, okay? Or they go through a portal or something, and so you see them 1 second, they're gone the next, that sort of thing. You also have people suggesting, and I kind of understand this argument. I do. I understand this argument that if they're on our evolutionary timeline someplace, that they're more intelligent than your normal animal, okay? I mean, they're walking upright, and they are, for all intents and purposes, human-like, okay? So if they're more intelligent, then they have more of a capability to be able to hide themselves, conceal themselves, disappear, right? Don't want to be found, right? They live in areas that not a lot of humans go, and we have not stepped foot on every piece of soil in this continental United States. You just can't physically. The mountain ranges, the remote areas in our national forests, you just can't step foot everywhere. So if they are an advanced, intelligent creature similar to humans in their intellectual capability, yes, they could probably avoid humans as much as possible. So there's that argument, right? And I do understand that argument. And some people will suggest that the reason why you can't find a body or skeletal remains is because they buried the dead. And they do so in such remote areas that you would never come across those burial sites. Or there's deep cave areas that are wholly undiscovered, and they live down inside of there, and they can disappear just like that, and you can't find them. And maybe their burial spots are down in those deep cave systems. Okay. I guess what you're saying is there's a motivation to stay hidden, so they stay hidden. All right. And that's why you can't find a body or skeletal remains. I understand that, and I follow that thought process a bit. But at the end of the day, there's no body, no skeletal remains, okay? You just have to accept that because that's what it is. Now, okay. So what do I believe? What's my personal thought on the existence of Bigfoot? Hey, it's simple. I want to believe, okay? That's my nature. I'm the type of person that wants to believe that there's something else out there beyond this life that I know, right? These four walls that I'm sitting in right now in my workshop, in the beautiful woods out here in Northeast Georgia. And by the way, I've been living in Georgia for about 5 years now, and man, when it rains, it rains. I mean, I'm talking steady for 3, 4 days straight. And so if you hear some background noise, it's all the rain that we've been getting. I think we're in day 3 right now. So it's unbelievable the amount of rain we get down here. And listen, that's why it's so beautiful, right? That's why Georgia is such a great state. My bottle opener, by the way, that I used to open that Sierra Nevada is a Georgia State bottle opener. Okay. I want to believe, all right? I'm not convinced, but I want to believe, okay? And I think the strongest argument, this is my opinion, the strongest argument for the existence of Bigfoot would be this phenomenon of newly discovered species every year. Okay. We talked about that earlier, right? Hundreds, if not thousands, of new species every year being discovered at our tallest mountaintops and our deepest oceans. And so I think the possibility of Bigfoot, the creature we call Bigfoot, being real it's there. That possibility is there, okay? It's nearly tangible, but it's not yet. And you won't convince me that Bigfoot's real until I see hard physical evidence, because that's who I am. I've never talked about my career that I spent 32 years doing, and I'm not going to on this channel. But I worked in a career field where it was built on logic and evidence and tangible things that led you from point A to point B. And so that's how I operate, that's how I work, that's how my brain functions. I've got to see the hard, cold evidence that there is a body or skeletal remains that can be dated to something in the last 50 years. But I want to believe, okay? So that newly or yet discovered species thing, I think, is the strongest argument. And being somewhere on our evolutionary timeline, I think, is a real distinct possibility. I mean, just ponder this for a second. If you've ever taken a DNA test, and, from Ancestry.com or 23andMe or whatever else is out there today, as we amass more data on DNA, we're finding some amazing things, including we're blowing out of the water old anthropological, say that 20 times, anthropological arguments for our evolutionary timeline, in that we've got Neanderthal and human, and we've always clearly separated those two things. But they're finding, as we amass more DNA data, there's a small percentage of the world population which has Neanderthal DNA mixed in with their own DNA. So a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA is making its way, or has made its way, into our bloodline, which makes the scientific community kind of rethink a little bit about the progression of our evolutionary process and whether these two had mixed at some point, these Neanderthals and humans. And absolutely they did, because the DNA evidence is there to prove that out. So that's why I think that argument for somewhere along our evolutionary timeline is somewhat strong. But again, I won't believe till I see a body or a modern dated skeletal remain, okay? So that's it on my first Bigfoot episode. When I was looking at some of the arguments supporting the existence of Bigfoot, this Native American folklore stuff has got me very intrigued. So I may do a future episode where I deep dive that a little more. And I eventually like to get into a lot of the video evidence that's been presented over the last 50 years, because I think that's very intriguing as well. I know a lot of that stuff, especially with artificial intelligence stuff and deep fake stuff, that a lot of that's and human motivation is faked or forged, that sort of thing. But there's some really intriguing footage out there that I'd like to get into a little further. Okay, I'm going to leave you with what I always do at the end of all my videos, and that is these two thoughts. One, please support your local tap rooms and breweries, right? Go out there and meet some new friends, drink some good beer. In today's economy, your local breweries could use your help. Every year we're losing, every state every year is losing 1 to 10 breweries. And I think that's kind of a sad thing. These are local business owners and local people that are working in these establishments, and they could really use your help today. So go see and visit your local breweries and tap rooms. And the second thing is the struggle is real. Man, whatever you're going through, whatever roadblocks have been put in your way, whatever life struggles you've got, it's real, okay? Talk to somebody. Talk to friends and family. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, seek a healthcare professional. And by the way, there's some websites now that you can actually connect with a healthcare professional. You don't have to go into a clinical setting. So I would suggest to you that think seriously about that if life is really presenting you with a lot of challenges, okay? There's no shame in that. In fact, you'll only be doing yourself a favor and everybody else, all right? Visit your local breweries and tap rooms. The struggle is real. My name is Matt, and this is Beer, Wood, Bigfoot, Ghosts. I'll say it again, Beer, Wood, Bigfoot, Ghosts, where I talk about anything on those 4 topics. Hey, it was my pleasure spending some time with you today. Hope to see you soon. Bye, ya.